Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Nittani Draws. I'm Nittani, and today I'm coming at you with a really fun challenge. I'm sure you've all seen it before. This is the Draw My Life challenge, where you take a whiteboard and you very quickly illustrate different pivotal moments of your life and speed it up really fast and tell your whole life story. So I'm going to start from the very beginning, and here we go. I was born in Portsmouth, Virginia, at a naval hospital. My dad was in the Navy, and my mom was a housewife. She was 19, and he was 20. We went to the beach all the time. My mom loved to lay in the sun, and she would dig a little hole and stick me inside with an umbrella over me so I wouldn't get burned up. I was blonde from being on the beach so much. Eventually, my dad left the Navy, and we moved back to Michigan, where my parents were from. I don't really remember a whole lot of this time, but I do remember that I had a really big white bed with pink walls. When I was 4, my mom had my little sister, Emily, and my life changed forever. My dad made me promise that I would always protect her and she would be safe no matter what, because I would always have her back. My family was very poor, and we moved from apartment to apartment a lot when I was little, and eventually we moved into my grandma's basement. She worked at a library, and I still credit my love of books and reading to spending time with her and reading books and going to visit her when she was at work. Our favorite book to read was A Bed for Frances, and I would ask her to read it again and again. She still talks about it sometimes. Soon my mom and dad would buy a trailer home, and we moved away from my grandma's, but we were still only about 15 minutes away from her, so I saw her all the time. When we moved in there was another girl who lived right next door, and she was about a year younger than me. She became my best friend. She is still one of my besties, and I can't imagine my life without her. We lived in the trailer home for a couple of years while my parents saved up the money to buy a house. We moved, and it was really messy and awful at first, but they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it became a home. I lived there for most of my life, and I still miss it sometimes. After a couple of years living there, my mom and dad got a divorce. I remember very little of the divorce, but I do remember the aftermath. It was a really hard time for all of us. My dad moved out and into an apartment, and we stayed with my mom in the house. We visited dad on the weekends for a while. But around this time, something really awful started happening, and a family member started to sexually abuse me. He was found out by my mom, and she put a stop to it, but it really affected me, and I had to see a psychiatrist and a counselor for a long time. I sometimes still have to. I'm glad that I was able to get out of that situation, and my mom always had my back. A lot of the other kids that were there didn't really have that. She was like a warrior. Eventually, my dad screwed up big time. He left my sister and I alone in an apartment at nighttime when we were sleeping to go out with one of his friends. My mom saw his car and knew that it was his car, and she left work. She worked midnights at the time in order to come and get us. The apartment door was left open wide, and she walked right inside. She got us ready to go, and as we were leaving, my dad showed up. There was a terrible fight. In hindsight, it was really scary, but at the time, all I could understand was that I loved them both. I didn't want to see my dad be so upset. I didn't get to see him very often after that, and I think that was for the best. Soon my mom was able to move over to day shifts, which meant she was available again for us during the evenings. These times are some of my fondest memories, even though they were really hard. It was Mom, Emily, and me against the odds, and we beat them. When I was 13, I started dating my first girlfriend, and I came out to my mom and my friends as bisexual. It was so scary to talk about it at first. I thought that my friends would judge me and leave me, and that my mom would freak out, but she handled it amazingly. She was just like, okay, and it was awesome. I found out later she went to her only lesbian friend afterward and totally freaked, but she didn't tell me about it until I was already grown. We laugh about it now because it's such an obvious part of my identity. My mom started dating again, and she met this guy that she really liked. Let's call him Jim. That's not his real name. He moved into our house after they had been together for a while, and they got married. He and I did not get along very well, and we often fought. We would yell at each other until we were blue in the face, and my mom would have to step in. A lot of the time it came down to he said, she said, and my mom was really stuck between a rock and a hard place. They got married when I was 14, which is the same time I started dating my first real boyfriend after my girlfriend had moved up north and too far away to continue a relationship. This guy and I were together for all of high school and sometime afterward. He was my first true love, and he and I did everything together. He was my date at my mom's wedding, for homecoming and prom, and every other thing that you do in high school. He had an amazing, supportive father who I loved, and his mom was really, really awesome. When I was in high school, I started getting really into art. I had done some art in middle school, but nothing formal, and mostly I just drew Sailor Moon and Tenchi Muyo characters. In high school, I started to take actual art classes and working on my craft. I had a teacher who didn't really care very much, and she seemed to spend more time with the kids who were troublemakers than she did with those of us who actually wanted to learn. I went to a poor inner city kind of school, and the teachers were totally overwhelmed with the students. They would have 30 or more kids in each class, so it's really no surprise that they were overwhelmed. I did have some really amazing teachers thrown into the mix as well, but they all must have been so stressed out. I was very much into choir in high school and was a member of at least 3 of them every semester. We toured all over the country to perform. It was incredible. Since my family didn't have the money for a lot of this stuff, I had to get creative to raise the cash. I did bottle drives. I walked from house to house asking people if I could have their bottles for the 10-cent deposit. I would buy cheap candy bars and sell them for $1 a pop. I'd sell my drawings, or I'd draw on people with gel pens. Anything I could do to make enough money to get to go on tour. I spent all of my free time either with my boyfriend drawing or in choir. Other than that, I slept. After dealing with Jim for what felt like forever, I ended up moving out. I got an apartment with my boyfriend and another friend. It was beyond tough at first, being that I was still a kid. I worked waitress jobs and started attending college. It was a tough time, but I had so much fun becoming the person that I am now. I started drawing a lot more, went out dancing every week at a local club, and started figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. As most first loves go, we ended up breaking up after 6 years. We were just going in very different directions in our lives, and I needed to progress forward. However, being that I hate being single, I started dating someone else a few weeks later. It was the definition of a rebound, though. We dated about a year, and I was pretty unhappy for the second chunk of 6 months. He cheated on me with a furry he met on Second Life. Rude. While at school, I made a lot of friends that I still have today, and I met my eventual husband, Lee. We met while debating, of all things, the ethics of Batman versus the Punisher. Needless to say, we started dating shortly after and have been together nearly 7 years at the time of recording. Once Lee and I moved out on our own, I was finally able to really focus on my art. I had a studio in our apartment, and now I have one in our house. I started my first official art shop while attending shows and conventions, and I actively started selling my wares online. Together, Lee and I have bought a house, gotten engaged, and married. We adopted our first cat, Gracie, from the Humane Society, adopted Xavier from a Siamese cat rescue, adopted our dog, Wally, from the pound, and our littlest kitty, Diana, just walked up to Lee on his birthday last year and adopted us. There's a reason we call him the Cat Daddy. About 3 years after opening my first shop, I changed the name and branding to Nittani's, and then I started YouTubing, and here I am now. Just over a year on the site and loving every moment of it. I love that our little community has grown as much as it has, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the coming months. Anyway, guys, if you like what you saw here today, make sure to hit that like button, get your bell notifications set up, and subscribe to see more time-lapse drawings, reviews, and tutorials. Head over to knitnews.com where you can find my blog with all sorts of resources for artists and YouTubers, as well as my shop where you can get prints, stickers, postcards, and originals. I update the shop every Friday night with new merch, so stay tuned to see what new stuff is coming out. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!